Hello again. Today we're going to be making displaying our contacts in the list view, and we're also going to be deleting contacts from our database. So we're going to be reading and deleting from our database today. Last time we set up all the SAML pages, and we also handled the events that happen in the main page. So today we're going to handle what happens in the display contacts page. Okay. So here are all our imports, where things we need to actually make the program run. Inside of our virtual class, we're gonna declare and initialize some of our variables that we're gonna be using, global variables. So we have a list that has a dictionary, which will be representing the each individual contact. So the list represents each contact, and the dictionary will represent each of the values. So basically, the list is a list of all the contacts, and the dictionary is an individual contact, which will have a key representing the data, and it will actually have the data as the value. For example, this would be first name, and then the first name would be like Bob. Okay, so we also have our string page, which is what we're gonna use to tell it if this was navigated from read button click, from the delete button click, or from the update button click. And we're gonna have our URIs. Remember that you should replace the URI with wherever you're hosting your PHP files. So if you actually type this how it is, it's not gonna work. Okay. So now this method is auto-generated for you by Visual Studio. So make sure you add the async. Make the method be an async method because we're going to be doing async operations in it. And in this async method, which is the onNavigated2 method, we are going to actually get the contacts from our navigation contacts object, and all we want to do is set page to whatever value page is in our navigation contact object. We're also going to create a string, and we're going to name it JSON, and we're going to await web async read. Read is our URI that we sent right here, and we're sending that in as the URI. Okay, so let's go down to a web async method, or class actually. Never mind, it is a method. Okay. So in our web async method, what we're doing is we're creating a new HTTP client, and then we are awaiting a response from our HTTP client using the getAsync method, where this is the parameter we sent the URI that we sent as a parameter. We're actually sending it in now in the getAsync method as a parameter. So then it's doing this request, the getAsync request, with the read URI that we sent. Once we get the response, we want to get the content, and we want to cast it as a string. So we're going to say read as string, and we're going to await. Basically what await does, it says don't move on past this point until this part is done. Okay, so we're going to save that into our JSON string, and then we're going to return the JSON. It's very simple to like make a HTTP call, as you can see. Once we once we actually got the string, as you can see right here, we were awaiting for it to be done. We get the string back, and then what we want to do is we get the substring from the very start to this string. What happens with, or the reason I'm using this line of code is because my web service tends to add HTML at the bottom, which we don't need from the response. So what we're doing is we're just truncating that end. As soon as we see that HTML comment, we're just truncating everything after it, because my web service actually appends it to the end of the response. Okay, so now that we got our new JSON string, we want to send it over to our parseJSON method. What this does is it actually reads the response, or it takes the content we got as a response, right? And it's going to turn into a JSON object, and then we'll be able to get the data from that JSON object using JSON built-in methods. And that's the reason why in the previous tutorial we had to use get the NuGet JSON.NET thing. Okay, so once we actually call the method, we're receiving the JSON string as a parameter, and we're making a JSON object out of it. Once we have a JSON object, we're trying to get the int value of success, and success will either have a value of 1 or 0. If it's 1, that means, okay, good, we actually got what we wanted. If it's 0, something went wrong, and we're not going to do anything. But if it is 1, we're then going to get a JSON array from our JSON object, which is this right here. And as you can see, this is how you get the array. Okay, and you're looking for the array named context. Okay. And then a J token basically will be each of the values inside of our array. So we're getting the first value inside of our array. And so like the first value would be just an individual context. Okay. And we're going to loop through it until we run out of context tokens, so JSON tokens. Okay. So what we're doing now is we're saving the value of the first name to a string, the last name to a string, etc. Getting all of the values from each individual context, and then we're making a dictionary to represent an individual context, and we're adding each value individually. So first name is going to be the key with first, which will be the first name. The actual value we retrieved from our response. After we added all the values we wanted, we're going to add the dictionary to our contact list. And then after that, we're going to make sure to move on to our next contact. Otherwise, we're going to get an error because we're going to run out of memory. This is just going to keep on repeating forever and ever with the same contact. So make sure you add this line. Without this line, you're not going to be able to escape this endless loop. Okay. After we're done filling in our contact list, which is our list of all, a list of all of our contacts, we're going to call this method to actually display the contacts. So how this is done is by making another loop, which loops through all of our contact lists. We're making a dictionary, and we're actually getting each individual dictionary from the contact list. Okay. This right here, contact con equals new contact. Remember when we had a user control? Okay, an item in the list view representing a contact. This is basically making a new of those user controls, and we're going to be making a user control for each individual contact to add to the list. This here is just because something I added. You don't really need to, but it just looks nicer when you run it. It'll alternate colors between black and blue, because in Windows Phone usually have a black background, and it'll just look like a giant list. And at least this way you can distinguish each individual contact, because every other contact will be either black or blue. So here we're just saying every even, context should be blue. Okay, so then we're just gonna make a temporary string value, and this is gonna contain our, the data we got from the dictionary. So first we're gonna try and get the value from the dictionary, which is first name, and we want it to save it to the string. So this is the value, or this is the key, and we're saying save the value into this our temp string, which is this one right here. Once we get the temp string, we're actually going to get our contact user control, and the text of it, we're going to set it to our value that we got from our dictionary. We're going to do that for each of these components or properties of our contact. So the first name, last name, area code, phone number, and PID. Okay. Once we set all of that up, we want to do context items.add contact. Okay, this right here, yeah, I know it's a little confusing because of my variable names. Bear with me. Context is our display context list view. So what we're saying is the list view .items.add. So we're adding an item to our list view, and that item is our contact user controller, which is this right here. So we're adding a user controller to our list view. Okay. So yeah, that's what happens when you're navigating to this page. Afterwards, we're going to handle what happens when an actual item on the contact list is tapped on. So here we have conditional statements that say if the page equals read, or if the page does not equal read. So if it's not read, it actually is going to do something. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything. So all you want to do is read it. Even if you tap on it, it shouldn't do anything because you're just reading it. But if you're not just reading, well then, what you do is you create your context and you get selected item 0 because you can tap on more than one, right? You can keep tapping on more than one thing, but you only want the first thing that was tapped because after we tap that one thing, we want to move to something else. Okay, so we're saying 0 because we want the first thing tapped. We're getting the ID of it, and we also want, we're getting the ID separately just because what we're going to do is, if it's an update method, we're going to send ID with the navigation in our navigation context object. Otherwise, we're not going to be actually sending a navigation context object because we're actually just going to be calling a method inside of this same page. And we want the ID to send in as a parameter with the method call. But anyhow, we're going to create a navigation context object as such with all our data, and we're going to say, as I was saying, if page.equals update, we want to navigate to the edit context page, and we're going to send in our navigation object. Otherwise, it's not going to be update, and it's not going to be read. It's definitely not going to be create, because create doesn't ever take you to this page. So that means it is delete. So else represents else if page.equals is delete, basically. We are going to await delete async. Basically, this is what we do when we want to delete an item or a contact from our database. We're sending in delete, which is our URI, and we're sending in the ID value so that it recognizes from the data. This is the ID value is what we're going to use as the value, the private ID in our database to delete the contact. So that's how we'll search for the contact we want to delete. Okay. So then once we're there, we want to make sure it's an async type. Right. I forgot to mention that context type should be async. So make sure you have the async. Okay. Async system.threading. Okay, so this is your daily async, which takes the URI, which will be our delete URI, so whatever it is, blah 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 blah, dot or slash delete underscore PHP or something like that. And then you have your ID as well, and you're making your HTTP client basically the same way you read, except that now you're actually sending in parameters. So you're gonna make a variable pair, which actually this could just have been pair, and we're gonna make a list with key value pair. Okay, and the key is gonna be the PID, just because that's the way it's written in the database. Right. And our actual value is going to be the ID, which we got sent in as a parameter. So it could be 1, 2, 3, or whatever. The string, obviously, is going to be a string. Okay. So then we're going to actually encode our value pairs into an HTTP URL, right? So HTTP form URL encoded content. We're encoding it into it. And then we're going to await a response. And we're going to use the post async, sending in our URI and the content, which is the encoded value pairs. And then we're just awaiting, we're getting the string representation of the content of the response. We're actually not handling it or doing anything with it, but theoretically you should be doing something with it. Like if you got a response of 0, then you should tell the user that something went wrong. And if you got a response of 1, then you should tell them that they actually deleted from the database. But in our app, we're not actually going to be handling that because it should work. Okay, that concludes this part of the tutorial. Next time we're going to see how to create and update our contacts database.